This is the Rerode Ewatt 2.0, and it's got some specs that will absolutely blow your mind. But before we get into the specs, let's go ahead, get it unboxed, and show you how to get this built. If you've been in the e-moto world for a while now, you've likely heard of the Rerode R1. This is that same chassis, however, it has got a full Ewatt powertrain behind it. So a lot like the Ventus 1, which is a Falcon 79 chassis with VTB components inside of it, Ewatt took this chassis and put their components into the drivetrain and made this an incredibly fast bike. Starting with the battery, we've got an 81 volt, 45 amp hour battery. This battery has a peak output of 32 kilowatts, which is a monster amount of power. This is the battery we use in a lot of our very high powered builds, and it is absolutely insane how far you can push this, and it stays incredibly consistent as you're riding throughout the power. Obviously, with every single lithium battery out there, you can feel it tend to fade over the course of using it. But this battery does it in such a consistent manner that you really know what you're going to get out of it every time you twist the throttle, which is why I use and trust this battery in my personal race bikes. Now, a high-powered battery is no good if you don't have a good controller pushing that, and luckily Ewatt went to EBMX to have them manufacture a controller specifically for this bike. And what EBMX did was take their known and loved EBMX X9000 and purely throw Ewatt's branding on top of that. So having an 81 volt battery with an EBMX X9000 controller essentially on the front of it means that this has the potential to be incredibly powerful, and you could definitely push and utilize that 32 kilowatt peak output from the battery with a controller as good as the EBMX X9000. So this bike has got one of the best controllers on the market and one of the best batteries on the market, but you got to complete the trifecta, and that means you need a good motor to be able to make it all work smoothly. The motor on this bike is one that I have never personally tested. Ewatt went and manufactured their own motor specifically for this build. So I am really excited to see how all three of them pair together. And if you pair all of them together right, this has the potential to be a 32 kilowatt, 1000 phase amp machine, which is just a huge amount of power. In fact, that is the same amount of power that I run on my personal race bike. And I gotta say, the rest of the chassis has to be super beefed up to be able to handle something like that. But luckily, Ewatt went ahead and replaced the belt drive system with a 420 chain drive. So that is a nice additional strength that they added right from the factory. But with all that power, you have to slow the bike down. Ewatt went ahead and developed brakes specifically for this bike. In fact, they are 6-piston brakes, which should have a ton of stopping power. I'm really excited to see how those actually feel while I'm out riding them, but they definitely look the part and they look quality. On the rear, we've got an 18-inch wheel with a nice meaty tire. It has got a 220 brake rotor as well as a 48 tooth 420 drivetrain sprocket. This hub is also straight pull, which is really nice. Those have been proven to be really good. I also like the chain adjusters that they have on here. They're a nice sleek design that kind of clicks into place, and then as you adjust it, you don't really have to fiddle with the actual adjusters themselves too much to get them in the right place. Moving over to the front end of the bike, we have got a 19-inch front wheel. This tire is kind of thin, a little bit weak. I would definitely go ahead and upgrade that tire, especially with the amount of power that this bike has. But beyond that point, the wheel should do fine. Now, because this is an 18-19 setup, that is never the best option to go with. I would prefer an 18-21 or a 16-19. That's definitely the best way to go, and it provides the best tire selection for you as well as the right pitch in geometry for a bike. But we'll see how it feels when I actually test it, see if the front end's too low, and then take it from there. If the front end is too low, we are in luck, because this is a Fast Ace ALX 13RC on the front end, which is a very proven, great budget fork. We've tuned hundreds of these forks and they work really well. Now, because that is the Fast Ace, that means that we can put our drop crown onto this, provide an extra inch of movement to be able to fit a 21-inch wheel onto this bike, no problem. So I'm really glad they went with that front fork. In terms of rear suspension, this is the RSH2. Now, I gotta say, in testing bikes in the past, I've never been very impressed by this shock, sadly, but I haven't found a single bike from the factory so far that comes with a rear shock that I'm really all that impressed by. In fact, one of the only shocks that I really trust is the EXT Arma. So usually with any bike, because suspension is the #1 priority to me, I will go ahead and upgrade the rear shock, even the front forks. These are great front forks from the factory. They'll be a lot of fun to ride for a long time. But suspension is the #1 thing to make a bike perform well. And with a bike with this much potential and power, I would definitely want to get the suspension and the wheel set up to be as good as I possibly could. So I can talk about specs all day, but let's throw this into perspective a little bit. This 81 volt, 45 amp hour battery alone costs $2,800. EBMX X9000 controller, about $1,200. Any sort of high powered motor like this is usually another $1,100. So to piece all of that together, I mean, that is over $4,000 that you are already spending on just the drivetrain. Now you also get the entire bike with that, and it comes in at $7,000. So if you're really looking for a really high powered build, my race bikes, after fully building them, after doing the suspension right, after doing the wheels, the components, the accessories, those bikes are upwards of 15 grand. So to get a good chassis and a good powertrain right off the bat for $7,000 is great value for the money, but I am excited to ride this and see if there is anything else that really needs upgraded. I've ridden a lot of these bikes, so I'm just speculating things like the rear shock needing upgraded and needing a 21-inch wheel and needing a drop crown. Those are things that I've just kind of learned over riding these bikes a lot for a period of time. However, I don't really know until I get out and test it, so stay tuned for another video where I get out and I put this bike through its paces, I see how good it all functions together, and I see if it needs to go any further to make this a capable race-winning machine. So stay tuned for that, and let me know what you think about the Rerode Ewatt 2.0.